Well, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming this evening. And again, with a crowd like this, we're going to have plenty of opportunity to have a nice conversation this evening. I'm Michael Alvarez. I'm a professor here at Caltech, and I'm the co-director of the Ronald and Maxine Lynn Center for Science, Society, and Policy, which I'm just going to call LCSSP from here on out because it is a bit of a mouthful. I'd like to welcome everyone to this evening's event, the Southern California Wildfires and Water Quality, Science Meets Policy. This event's co-sponsored by our center, LCSSP, by the Lynn Center for Global Environmental Science, and by the Resnick Sustainability Institute. Since our center's founding in 2023, we've focused on providing forums for research and discussion of topics at the intersection of science and society. Our goals are to help to shape science policy by building on Caltech's scientific expertise and to build and foster connections between scientists, policymakers, and regulators. One of the important areas of our activities has been in the realm of climate and sustainability science. We've developed quite a few initiatives in this area, in particular with the focus on water quality, which we'll talk about this evening. When the wildfires broke out on January 7th, for many of us, and certainly myself included, quality of water was not top of mind. But it quickly became clear that evening and in the days that followed that the fires had possibly damaged critical water infrastructure and had most likely contaminated some of the local water supplies. So tonight's event is designed to bring our scientists together with policymakers to discuss how water quality was impacted by the wildfires earlier this year, to talk about what quick steps were taken at the time to understand those impacts, to mitigate and to resolve them, and to talk also about how scientists and policymakers can work together collaboratively now and in the future to continue to understand how we can make our critical infrastructure more resilient in the face of these types of severe weather events, natural disasters, and of course, longer-term significant climate change. But before we start, I have the great opportunity to walk you through some of the required logistical details. First off, we are going to be using an app which Andy will talk about in a minute for Q&A. So if you're not familiar with Caltech's Wi-Fi system, here's a quick chance to get on. Use the Caltech visitor, enter a username and password, click join, and just click on the security certificate. You can also hit that QR code right there if you want. I'll wait a sec just to give folks an opportunity to get all that info. And then the other announcement I need to make, of course, is that we are in an area that is prone to earthquakes. So if we do start to hear shaking, and if everybody's phone in the room starts to go off with an earthquake warning, please try to protect yourself using the usual drop, cover, and hold on. There are restrooms available if you go back up and go downstairs, one level below the mezzanine. And there's an ADA restroom down on the first floor in the lobby area. I also need to remind folks about our statement of ethical conduct in these kinds of public forums. We do want to have an open and honest conversation, as is the norm here at Caltech, but we also do want to remind folks to be respectful of others and to generally obey the principles of our code of conduct here at Caltech. Finally, this event's being recorded. The recording is going to be available on the LCSSP YouTube channel after the event. Easy to find. You can go on our website or you can just search on YouTube or search online. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Professor Andrew Thompson, one of my colleagues here at Caltech. He's the John S. and Sherry Chen Professor of Environmental Science and Engineering. He's the director of the Ronald and Maxine Lynn Center for Global Environmental Science, which is another Lynn Center on campus. And he's the executive officer for environmental science. Professor Thompson is going to moderate tonight's discussion. He will introduce our distinguished participants, and he will work through the Q&A. So thank you for coming this evening.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike, and it's really nice that we could bring the two Lynn Centers together for this event. So as Mike mentioned, my name is Andy Thompson. I am the director of the Lynn Center for Global Environmental Science, and as the name suggests, a lot of the work in our department is looking at global problems, but I think the importance of our research really comes home when you have local events like the one we had this winter. And so I was just been really impressed by seeing a number of the people through the ESE department, the Lynn Center, the GPS division, and across Caltech as a whole, to really put down a lot of the work that they're doing and turn their attention to learning more about the fire, what happened during the events, and how we're going to have a safe recovery from that. A lot of that work has been shared with the community through the Caltech Science Exchange. We have had webinars on soil quality. We have had a webinar on air quality. We have a little bit less expertise today at Caltech, although this was a really important part of our ESE program for a long time, on water quality. And so we were very excited that we could bring not only our own expertise in Hannah, but also two external speakers to come today. So it is my pleasure to introduce Stacie Takeguchi, Andy Whelton, and Hannah Druckenmiller. I'm going to introduce them. I'm going to give them a few minutes to talk a little bit about their background and their research, and then we're going to shift over to a couple discussion topics. And as Mike said, we're very happy to take questions along the way. So we'll put the Slido back up here. The way this will work is that you can use that QR code. You can go onto Slido. Sarah Kassier is very kindly moderating the questions for us, and she'll pass them along up here. We are a small group. We also have a microphone over here. So if at some point you'd like to just put your hand up and ask a question, we can handle that as well. Okay, so I'd like to start by introducing our panel, and I'm going to start here with Stacie Takeguchi. She's the Chief Assistant General Manager at Pasadena Water and Power. She has more than 24 years of experience in the water industry. She oversees various operational, strategic, and managerial initiatives of the overall utility and is responsible for all aspects of Pasadena's water system. Prior to joining PWP, she worked for the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California for 15 years, serving in various capacities, including leading regional drought action and planning efforts. Additionally, she has experience in managing innovative stormwater multi-use projects at the County of Los Angeles Department of Public Works. She has a bachelor's degree from Tulane University and is a licensed engineer in the state of California. So Stacie, please take a few minutes to talk a little bit about your background.
All right, great. And I'd like to take this time to actually introduce a little bit about what we do at Pasadena Water and Power. But before that, I want to say good evening and thank you for being here today. This is great. And I'd like to introduce some key players. I know I'm up here speaking, but throughout this event, we have some true heroes, some in the audience right now. So if you could stand up, some of the team at Pasadena Water and Power, Jack Miyamoto, if he's the head of water quality, thank you very much. And Yen Chu, also one of our principal engineers, working 24/7 on that too. We also have our neighboring agencies. I know we have Foothill, Crescenta Valley, and I'm not sure if we have more agencies there too, but if you could stand up and say hi. We're all in this together. We're working very, very closely together on it, and it's a true pleasure working with this team. Quite fantastic. Yen is also a graduate at Caltech, so almost as cool as Tulane. So going to my slide really quickly. So again, my name is Stacie Takeguchi. I have the honor of serving as the Chief Assistant General Manager and Head of Water at Pasadena Water and Power. And what we do is deliver safe and reliable water and power. So right here, our vision, our mission, that's our North Star, particularly during crisis. So that's what kept us going and guiding our decisions throughout the entire process. We are a community-owned, not-for-profit utility, meaning that we're all stewards, all of us here are stewards of our water system and our water future. I think that's quite important. Anything we get as far as revenues, we get to invest right back into the system, which is key in resilience through this event as well. Now, we also serve an area a little bit larger than the city boundaries, including in Altadena. We're one of the partners there in Altadena. Most people don't know this, actually, that we are the largest water provider in Altadena as well. So when I say we're part of this as a team, we really are part of this as a team. Next slide here. So how we deliver on this mission is through reliable water supplies, being one of the key components. We have a diversified water portfolio. I know there's a lot of misinformation out there that didn't have enough supplies from all of our sources. That wasn't true. One of the challenges we'll talk about later was about misinformation. But we have a diverse water supply portfolio. About a third of our water supply is from our groundwater basin, which is right beneath your very feet right now. I could say, imagine a cup of sand full of water. Even if the water level is below the sand level, that's still there. And that's what we do with our groundwater. So about a third of our water is from right here locally, and about 2/3 imported with our partnership with the Metropolitan Water District. Pasadena is one of the founding cities in the creation of this regional water district that serves all of Southern California. 19 million people get water from the Colorado River and Northern California as well. So a diverse portfolio mix there is really key. Next slide, sorry, thank you. And so we have supply, we have to be able to deliver it. And so we have a very robust and resilient system to deliver that water through pipes, wells, treatment plants, you name it, we got it. Right, over 500 miles there too of pipelines. Next slide. And of course, you can have water, you can have it delivered, but the key to this topic is water quality. Water quality is of the utmost importance. And people, my team, you hear that stressing, I stress that all the time, people in the community, you hear me stressing that all the time as well. We are very fortunate, we have a wonderful water quality team. We have our own water quality lab, one of the few agencies that have our own water quality lab. We are a full-service utility, full-service city, and that's key also in terms of resilience. We have our treatment plants, and a key point of water quality is to be able to trust the water. We are fully transparent, and we keep that as a mantra as well, is to be as transparent as possible so you know your water quality, and that's all available here. And we kept that mantra throughout the crisis as well. So overall, I just want to say it's a pleasure to serve this community, and we get to serve this community as a collective. I kind of started that at the beginning of my speech as a collective. Not just water, but water and power, which was also key during this crisis, and with the city, a full-service city, in partnership with fire, in partnership with police, and our own public health department, et cetera, and as a region and beyond. So that's a quick introduction of Pasadena Water and Power. I hope that wasn't too much. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stacie. Okay, next, it's my pleasure to introduce Andy Whelton, who is professor of civil and construction engineering, and as well as environmental and ecological engineering at Purdue University. Dr. Whelton and his team investigate and solve problems that affect our natural and built environment. His expertise focuses on environmental chemistry and engineering, disasters, polymer science and engineering, water quality, infrastructure, and public health. He leads Purdue University's Center for Plumbing Safety and co-developed the online Building Water Safety short course for health professionals. Professor Whelton earned his PhD, Master's of Science, and a Bachelor's of Science degree at Virginia Tech, but he's also worked for the U.S. Army and the National Institute for Standards and Technology, as well as in the private sector. So Andy, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much. So I'm here because there's a lot of great people in the audience, in the community, that really want the community to be stronger after this fire. And I just want to say thank you for the invitation for everybody and everybody who's out there or listening in. My background really started with frustration with regards to making decisions without really having any data years ago, 20 years ago. And that's kind of what led me to the PhD and what led me to trying to help communities, utilities, agencies, households, and businesses understand how to respond to and recover from a disaster to kind of inform that decision. If we could show, oh, perfect. Nope, that's great. So in January, I was asked by the R.S. Kane Foundation to come out and talk with them about how they could better help their community respond to and recover from these fires. And so it was pretty recent after the fires, and we had talked about the types of issues that they're going to have with water, the types of issues they're going to have with stormwater, ocean water, pools, debris, soil, indoor air, and such. And generally, all this experience has been collected really over the years responding to disasters. And so I was involved in the campfire response, trying to get California stood up and understanding how to respond to and recover from those events. partnered with water utilities who were dealing with hazardous waste level contamination in their water systems and trying to figure out how to get it out. We've collaborated with counties, Boulder County, Colorado, and responded to the Marshall Fire. In Lahaina, we were called in by Maui County, and then a bunch of different chemical disasters, East Palestine, Ohio, and such. And so our expertise basically is, okay, this happened. What do we need to know? Where do we need to test? How do we figure out what to test for? And how do we get people back safely? And so that's really what we've driven to. And I'm very excited to be here today because a lot of the reason why Pasadena Water and Power has gotten to where they are is because they followed the science that was built in the last 7 years by a whole bunch of different people. And they have amazing people that helped stand up the utility to make sure that the firefighters could fight the fires that they could and the power get back as soon as possible. And so we're here today, here at Caltech, where we give the utmost credence to science and fundamental understanding. And I'm very proud to be here with you and to be sharing the stage with these individuals. If we could just show the next slide. We have 2 studies ongoing right now. One is a household survey for people that have been impacted by the fire, either outside the fire perimeter or inside the fire perimeter. And if you know somebody that has been affected or might want to participate, they're welcome to participate. It's anonymous. We're looking for needs and experiences and insurance experiences as well in this survey. And so what we plan to do is in the next month or so start rolling out some of the results, but it closes at the end of May. And so you'll be hearing from us soon, but we're looking for a last push here. Also, we're reviewing home environmental testing reports. So if you or somebody you know has been infected by the fires and they had somebody do testing at their house or their apartment, we're actually reviewing those reports for free through this study, and they can submit them confidentially. We're not going to map them. We're not going to do anything with personal information, but we are reaching out to people when we find issues. So if the contractor's using the wrong lead standard, we're calling people up about that. When the contractors are maybe not using the right method, we're calling people up about that, and so that they can then go back to their contractors and address those issues so they can understand their property safety. So those are 2 studies that are ongoing now, and I'm happy to talk about anything else, but I'm just really elated to be here with you all, to be at Caltech, where we recognize the importance of evidence-based decision-making, and here we are, so thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Andy. And then last but not least, Hannah Druckenmiller, who many know well, is Assistant Professor of Economics and also a William Hurt Scholar here at Caltech. Dr. Druckenmiller is also a Faculty Research Fellow at the National Bureau of Economic Research. She's a University Fellow at Resources for the Future and also affiliate, of course, of Caltech's LCSSP. Her research aims to provide empirically based estimates for the environmental benefits and economic costs associated with natural resource protection, including flood mitigation, value of natural land, and developing new approaches for accounting for ecosystem services in climate policy. She received her PhD in agriculture and resource economics in 2021 from UC Berkeley. Thanks for being here, Hannah.
Thanks, Andy, and it's so exciting to be here with Andy and Stacie speaking to all of you today. So I'm an economist, and I primarily think about land use regulation, where we should conserve lands and where we should develop them. But I'm increasingly interested in how we can design policies to increase resilience to natural disasters and to promote climate adaptation. And although a lot of my historical work has been on flooding and how to mitigate flood risk and adapt to floods, like many of the faculty here at Caltech, I'm becoming increasingly interested in building resilience to fires. And so I'm just really excited to be here and to learn with all of you today.
Great. Thank you so much. Did you want to talk to this slide?
I just put up this slide to, it's easy to think that one experience is everyone's experience, but the way that water is set up and managed in LA is very diverse. So we have lots of different districts, and they're all interconnected. And so I just wanted to point out, to kind of set the stage for the discussion, that there's lots of different suppliers here that face different constraints and different risks, and to just keep that in mind as we move through the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Hannah. Okay, so I'm going to put the slide back up for the Slido again, so if you have questions as we go along. We're now going to transition into the part of the panel discussion where we're going to address a number of different topics. And we're going to start, I think, probably the one that people are most interested in. We're going to talk about the impacts on the water system and quality of water that happened actually during the Eaton fire. And so I want to start with you, Stacie. And I was wondering if you could describe a little bit what happened during the Eaton fire event from the utility perspective, and really what were the biggest challenges for PWP in the immediate response to the Eaton fire.
Got it. Overall, this devastating Eaton fire ravished Pasadena, Altadena communities, truly an unprecedented emergency event. So what we did as utility was first prepare. So walk you through kind of a story from our perspective of what the event, how the event unfolded. And that at that time was more about the wind event. If you recall on the news, et cetera, there was extreme wind conditions. And that's actually what fueled the fire as well. But extreme wind conditions labeled particularly dangerous situation. I've never even heard that before. But that was the wind conditions there. So frankly, we were ready to go days before the fire even happened. And that was key. We had our crews staged, equipment ready, and our reservoirs pre-filled for any kind of emergency. Our city EOC was activated. In fact, it was during one of our EOC meetings in the evening that the fire chief said, hey, we just got a report about a potential fire. And so that was there. So we were ready to go for any kind of emergency event. Of course, no one can predict the scale and the devastation of this fire. Then I get a call soon after that. One of my section supervisors says, hey, I can see the fire from my backyard. His first reaction was to respond and go back to work to then go and protect critical water systems. That's a tremendous example of service over self, and that's what you have with your PWP team. Folks working for the community even as their own homes were in danger. And so that was incredible. And then, they went out there in the face of the fire with our other first responders, fire and police, et cetera, and try to help protect or save as much critical infrastructure as we could, whatever we couldn't remove to help mitigate any damages. And I remember this fire was so erratic and spread so fast. I remember saying, hey, on this area, guys, if you already have the police escorts, et cetera, try to hit these facilities as well on the east. And I remember them saying, boss, it's pretty far inland. I don't think it's going to get there. But sure enough, that fire spread so quickly. And in no time, it was engulfed in flames as well. And so overall, we had great teams out there trying to protect. So when we talk about first responders, that's also your utility workers, water and power. And then soon after that, it became clear that the fire engulfed not just that area, but moved west and started engulfing even more area and potentially impacting even more facilities. So our first thought was about public safety. And with public safety in mind, not knowing what the fire is doing to our facilities, we out of abundance of caution, we issued a do not drink water notification. First time in our agency's history, and very, very new to this region. And it had to be a quick decision. And so you can thank Jack as well with all his expertise to try to help that. And frankly, this is before even knowing what ConOps was and the science behind it, because you don't really think about that. Not everybody researches that until you have to deal with it. And so going through there out of abundance caution for the areas served by the facilities that may have been impacted. And the next part was about communication, how to get the information out quickly and effectively without perfect knowledge, without perfect information. Just know that there's something that could be happening. It's out of abundance of caution. And the key challenge, talked about challenge, was about misinformation. Now, this impacted about a third of our service area at the time, which was essentially the evacuated area. But misinformation was spreading almost as fast as the wildfire, really flaming the fans of fear, saying there's no water that's safe to drink. And it doesn't matter where you are, and not just in Pasadena, in every area, right? And since we're one of the first agencies to have put on the do not drink water notification, we kind of got hit in the press pretty hard. But time showed that that was proven to be the right decision, hard decision, but the right decision for public safety. So communication-wise, we got out there. Interesting fact is we lost connection to our servers because of the fire temporarily. So, but we had to get information out. A key thing for all of this, water quality especially, is to be transparent and to get as much information out as possible. So we had a static map that we put up on our website. And, but once our server's gone, our team worked through the night with GIS and other tools to put up an interactive map of the impacted area. So people can type in their address and they can see exactly if they're in the impacted area or not. We also developed overnight an FAQs page. So you can see what's, if you have any questions, you can go right there. So, and that's front and center, and you can understand. So you can also make informed decisions, like Andy mentioned as well. So communication was key, and communicating with the other agencies. If you recall, it wasn't just the Eaton fire, it was the Palisades fire and other fires throughout Southern California. So we all got to have the same consistent messaging, otherwise it is confusing throughout the region. And so luckily we have those relationships, and we partner with all of them to begin with to have that discussion, consistent messaging on the do not drink. And if you recall, some places did a boil water notice at first, and then that had to be changed, and et cetera. And the ConOps report came in maybe a couple of days after. And luckily we partnered with Metropolitan, who brought Andy on board and said, hey, this is a key thing was benzene. But we already were doing above and beyond at that point. So, and that was actually our mantra, go above and beyond, in terms of water quality testing, in terms of transparency. So we tested more than the constituents that were required. We tested more sites as well, and and that saved us in the end, because later on the Division of Drinking Water said you got to do more. So that actually helped out, and we're transparent. We show all our results on a website. So if you're in the community, you can see that. So if we say we're lifting the do not drink because it passed all the water quality tests, we're able to confirm it, you can see the data. It's out there. So I think that was key, and then working with our partners was key there all the way through too. And overall, I talked about the misinformation being a challenge, but another challenge was we're sprinting a marathon. So it was a lot of fatigue that could happen. If you're dealing with this situation, we have to work through a lot of things. But in the end, we know you can't move forward without safe water quality, as mentioned at the beginning of this talk, right? You can't live without safe water quality, safe drinking water. And by our crews, some in this room today, working around the clock, assessing our systems that were damaged once we had access to that, restoring our systems, doing all the water quality testing, and then some. We were able to lift our do not drink water notification within days. Now, not months, not years, as you're going to hear some other stories, but days. 5 days for majority of our system, about 15 days for the last few percent of our system as well. So that's key and that's critical. And this couldn't happen without the team that we have and without the community support. It meant so much that we got a lot of community support there too, like thank yous, and also what can we do to help. And that was tremendous. And the only way we're going to get through this is together. So we appreciate that. I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Stacie. Maybe just before we move on, maybe one quick follow-up question. You talked quite a bit about communication going out and talking to the public about what you were seeing. Was there any information that would have been very helpful in terms of what was coming in during the fire itself that would have been especially helpful in responding to the water quality issues?
Yeah, and we have that too. So we're very open. We have a lot of calls about, hey, even after we lift the do not drink, any questions, it's good to contact us and we can alleviate those concerns, or we can go check it out. So all of that too. I think some information coming in is our neighbor's house got burned down and the water structure is just flowing, so go out there and check it out and turn that off too. The Army Corps, when they did their sweep, the same thing as well. So we did that ourselves, but it's good to have a second check and all the way through. But the key thing was also communicating within the city, and the county, the fire departments, the police departments, health, and more, all the first responders.
Great. Thank you, Stacie. Andy, you have had quite a bit of experience working in different fire incidents. What did you find was unique about either the Eaton fire or across the different events that your team has worked at when we're thinking about water quality?
So looking back in the last 8 years or so, I would say what we saw happen in the Eaton fire area was not necessarily too unique, except I would say Pasadena Water and Power kind of found their way out of the woods faster than others because they were not as damaged as some others, where they didn't lose 50 or 80% of their service population, but they also had a plan, and they were communicating organically with the community and receiving stuff and responding to that. We have seen that, like with Paradise, California, when they lost about 14,000 homes in the 172-mile water system was depressurized. They didn't know where to go, so what they did was, and they lost, basically all of its customers, so they had no revenue anymore. So they couldn't actually pay their employees shortly after the fire unless there was some type of influx of cash that could support them. So there's these larger systems that have catastrophic damage and they're challenged infrastructure-wise. In Paradise, 30 of 36 of their workers lost their homes. And so after that, you basically had everybody at the water utility leave because they had to take care of their families, right? So you have that. We didn't necessarily have that here, but we did have situations like with the types of infrastructure damage. You had some contamination some places, and then the smaller systems generally bear the brunt more so than the larger systems. And we saw that in Colorado, and we've seen that in elsewhere. So it takes them longer to recover, primarily because they just don't have the staff or the revenue or reserves to pay for people to come in to do the work to get it back.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and we will definitely return to this topic of the process to recovery and how that is handled different by larger and smaller water agencies. So maybe last question down at Hannah. We've talked a little bit about communication and what happened during the event. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about how the community, either immediately after the fire or in the following weeks, received information about water quality and how that helped people make decisions about going back to homes or just what their plans were going to be in the aftermath.
Sure. So I think the utilities did an amazing job of getting the information out there. And like Stacie said, there was a lot of coordination. And more even than that, there was efforts to get it out across multiple channels so that you would reach different segments of the population. So there was information on utility websites, city websites, county websites, but also on social media, hand-distributed flyers. They were really responsible at trying to reach the wide audience. I think where we might have run into a little bit of trouble is that then that information gets picked up by news outlets or by social media that's not communicating all of the pertinent information. And so when there were changes and warnings from a boil advisory to a do not drink to a do not use, all of the pertinent details which were available on the county websites and the utility websites didn't necessarily percolate through all of the channels that people were actually getting information from. I don't know, my hope for water quality information is that it becomes kind of like earthquakes in California, where we know we live in a high fire risk area. This becomes a part of the culture to know the different needs of preparedness and what all of these different warnings mean. But I think for people that weren't experienced with this type of disaster, one of the things that was really hard is that you grow up thinking that if water isn't potable, you boil it. And then when you get benzene in the water, heating water is the worst thing you can do because you can release it into the air. And so if we're able to come up with communication devices that people can understand when we're not in a crisis mode, so that they are better prepared when we are in crisis, that's my hope moving forward. But it's really hard. And I think the other thing that was super hard is that there was a great amount of effort to communicate where water was safe and where it wasn't. But when there's fear, even people that are in safe areas are scared to drink water. And that increases the pressure on resources like bottled water that's being handed out or that people are trying to purchase at stores. And so the imperative of not only communicating when water isn't safe to drink, but also when it really is, and the need to leave the resources for the people who need them most, who are affected, I think really came to light during the crisis.
Great, thanks, Hannah. And I think maybe just before we move on, I realize, Andy, we actually heard a nice talk from you earlier today in the environmental science and engineering part. We heard all of the different ways that fire can impact water quality. But I don't know, Stacie or Andy, you want to talk a little bit about actually what were the biggest aspects that impacted water quality? Was it the pipes? Was it ground soil getting into groundwater, et cetera? What were the issues you were most concerned about?
For
Go right ahead.
okay, for our utility, first it was the unknown, right? The fire surrounded our facilities. We actually don't know what's happening there. So whether it be debris, whether it be ash, getting into our system. So that was the first concern, and that's why we went with a do not drink. We went straight there because it could be VOCs as well, right? So we didn't go to do not boil, we did do not drink. And then later on, as more information, and we also don't know what we don't know. So, I mean, one of the key things is we're part of the, what I said wasn't that important. As part of being the Metropolitan Water District, I get a lot of calls about how can we help, right? And a big part of that was, how you can help is actually to help with the research, because we're responding. So at the same time, what about the research needs? What are the key things? And they actually are the ones that help bring Andy on board and to help us know about the CONOPS and the benzene order and things of that nature, and talking to the Division of Drinking Water. So then it was more VOCs. Now, we didn't have as much concern with the VOCs because we use high-quality materials. We actually don't use PVC piping. We don't use plastics in our system. So it wasn't as big of a concern, but we wanted to make sure. Like I said, our mantra was above and beyond. So we made sure to test those things. So it was the benzene that could have been coming back from the burned houses that we're then most concerned about based on the body of science that was built there too, and which I'm hopefully can help build and help add to that body of science.
Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would just say that right now when fires happen, regardless if it's a tiny system or a large system, when a building burns down and you lose pressure in the water system, like maybe there's too much hydrogen demand or there's too many structures that are leaking, you can actually suck debris and contamination from this burning house into the pipe down through the water meter and then into the water main. And so this is kind of one of the ways that people can have contaminated water. When we talk about VOCs or SVOCs, that's like volatile organic compounds. So these are basically chemicals that like to be in the air. They like to jump out of the water, like benzene and some other things. And then there's semi-volatile organic compounds, and these are heavier. They don't really like to jump out of the water, so they generally stay dissolved in the water. So you can have this phenomena happen. You can have plastics burn or thermally decompose at about 150 degrees centigrade. Wildfires can reach like 1,000 degrees centigrade or over 1,000. And of course, the distance from the heat source would influence the temperature of that pipe. And then you can also have other systems issues where maybe hydrants are left open or storage tanks have vents. You have burning trees and other things can release benzene or VOCs, and that can be sucked in and then mixed with the water and dragged to the system. So those are like the three ways that water systems can get contaminated by this wildfire issue. And to all utilities' point, you could potentially have multiple situations occur in the same water system area. It's not just like one or the other. And we don't have the science now to tell you why it occurred here and why it didn't occur here. And so that's where we need to go from a scientific perspective, and that's what Stacie's alluding to, is like the lessons that are learned here from Pasadena, but also from the small utilities in the Palisades. We need to build on that so that the next community that faces what this community faced can get back faster and maybe defend certain infrastructure in a way that lessens the chance that it happens.
Great. Thanks very much, Andy. Okay, so at this point, I think we're going to transition a little bit to talking about the recovery period. I continue to encourage people to ask questions on the Slido, or if you just want to raise your hand, we're happy to take questions as we go along as well. So, Andy, again, with your experience working with different communities after these events, in terms of both the sort of short-term and the long-term recovery, what are going to be some of the most challenging aspects for communities to think about getting back into these burn areas and how we address questions of water quality?
So we have a study that's wrapping up now, which basically shows that even with Paradise's situation and some of these other mega fires, that the water system actually isn't the hindrance to rebuilding. It actually, a lot of it is debris removal. 6 to 9 months generally is the debris removal duration window, and as water systems get repaired, they actually just disconnect the infrastructure from themselves so that they can fix themselves. So that, I think, is really what the issue is generally, and so, looking ahead, recovery is, when am I going to be able to get back to my property safely? When's my water going to be safe? And I think what this incident and all the others now have shown us is, like, we got this. Like, the water, we got this now. We know how to deal with this. There might be some situations where we need to, like, navigate some issues, but, like, there's a responsive community from a utilities standpoint. Like, it's not just Pasadena. It's a bunch of different places. And now there's enough evidence where there's peer pressure, right? So there's, if you have a fire in a certain area that doesn't necessarily think there might be an issue, there is peer pressure to say, look, we need to take a forward-leaning approach to this. We need to test, and then we can lift the order. So I think that's where we are from a water perspective, but from a rebuilding and recovery perspective, debris removal seems to be the longest issue, and there's ways to optimize that looking forward.
Right. So, I mean, and we've heard from some of the previous webinars we've had that this period of debris removal will result in resuspension of dust, et cetera, and there are some real concerns there for soil quality and air quality. Do any of those concerns sort of propagate through to thinking about water quality as well? That could be a question for, I guess, anyone on the panel here.
Experts.
I don't think anybody's looked at that yet, but the nice thing about water quality once it passes the treatment facility is that it's contained. We generally don't have open drinking water reservoir, like potable waters that you could just drink out of and slurp out of. We contain them, we protect infrastructure from it. The dust and debris wouldn't necessarily get into a storage tank. Like, let's say there's a whole bunch of debris removal operations next to a storage tank. It would just, there's no vacuum, so it's not sucking anything in. So the water, even in those situations, would be unaffected.
Great. Yeah, go ahead.
If I can add to that also, we're diligent in our water quality monitoring. And like I said, we have our own water quality lab, so we can turn those results around very quickly. And so with the above and beyond mantra, we continue to test diligently our entire system.
Great, thanks. Stacie, since we're sort of on this topic then, maybe I can ask you to talk a little bit about PWP's path to recovery, what happened over those first few days. But I think it'd also be interesting to hear, Altadena has this diversity of water agencies and what some of the challenges are for large water agencies versus smaller water agencies.
Okay. I'd say we're on an expedited path to recovery, and that's a very positive thing. One, we invested in a resilient system to begin with. Luckily we have the forethought and the vision from my predecessors, really, and we continue to do that. On the type of materials we use, I mentioned we don't use plastic, we use copper for our service lines, et cetera, our mains as well. And we keep that updated. So I think those are key things there. We have our own construction operations and maintenance crews, along with our own water quality lab. So I think that helps us expedite our recovery effort. Also, we continue to sprint this marathon. We do have damaged reservoirs. The road to recovery is partnership. We have it was a great story. Our neighboring agency, if from your map, the one right next to us on the northeast, Kinaloa Irrigation District, we have multiple emergency interconnections, and that's a key thing too. Emergency interconnections, that connection with other water agencies is key. And during the fire, the emergency interconnection helped them save their area. They got water from us. By the way, we were very fortunate. We never had, we weren't out of water during the fires. None of our hydrants ran dry. Then after the fire, one of our reservoirs was damaged. It's out of service. But in order to continue delivering water, we could isolate that and use an emergency interconnection with Kinaloa. So we're actually balancing their system and our system, and we're integrated that. And so that's a really good news story. So that's a road to recovery. And not only is that teaching us what we can do this time around, it also helps us about the next time around, what we can do together. And we are upgrading all of our emergency interconnections, frankly, from this event. And like I said, we have our own crews, so we've already changed out all the damaged meters, hundreds and hundreds of meters already done. And we are very close to both our city and county planning. We have weekly meetings about the rebuild. Although debris removal might be the biggest time critical path, we don't want to be part of that critical path or stopping folks from rebuilding. And so we're being very proactive about that to make sure that we can meet all the fire codes when they rebuild, including all the new sprinkler systems, et cetera, that they're going to need when they rebuild their homes. And so we are definitely on that path to recovery there. When you talk about size of an agency, I think of us kind of like that Goldilocks story, like not too small, not too big, we're just right, So we, we don't, we have resources, we have our own teams, but we're also nimble. You can hear differences with larger agencies that you heard in the Palisades fire, and smaller agencies there too. But again, the path is to work together on that. So we're here for each other. We have some folks from Foothill, et cetera, and their agencies that got greatly damaged, and we're here to help all together, all the way through. And we're all part of the Metropolitan Water District, so we're all connected to that big regional water family as well.
Great. Thanks, Stacie. Maybe just one last question for the panel, and then I'm going to take a few questions that have come in from the Slido. So we do want to touch a little bit on aspects of policy. So Hannah, could you talk a little bit about what aspects of water policy impact both how communities prepare for wildfire and how that might also influence the recovery period?
Yes, of course, there's many policies that matter here. I think one of the ones that's top of mind for me is how you finance recovery efforts, which might be more important for smaller water districts than for larger ones, and how you set up risk sharing among districts in order to help people rebound faster. So the interconnections is a great example of how even if you have separate districts, you can set up kind of sharing that spreads risk across those. The financing, I think, is also a really interesting piece. Connecting people to financing that not only helps them rebuild quickly, but also helps them rebuild better. So building in financial incentives in order to build resilient systems that take the pressure off just rebuilding quickly and actually put more pressure on kind of rebuilding, right? Systems that you can isolate, systems that use high-quality materials that are less vulnerable to risk. And so I think that's one area where, the state has worked a lot, and there's a lot more to be done to improve those financing structures. Kind of in the same vein as access to insurance. We think a lot about access to property insurance for individual homeowners, but businesses and utilities also need insurance to help them rebound from disasters as well, and so making sure that that type of access is available. I mean, I study land use, so I'm particularly interested in how we can change, maybe not water policy, but even zoning where we build in order to take pressure off water systems that face high risk, and how to zone infrastructure so that it's protected. So if we think about building kind of protective buffers around individual houses, you can think about doing the same thing for water infrastructure or for other types of critical infrastructure. So those are some of the things I've been thinking about, but there's almost too much to mention here, and so I'll let Andy and Stacie chime in if there's ones top of mind for them.
Anything to add in terms of thinking about policy moving forward and insurance for PWP, et cetera?
Yeah, there's a lot.
We found a tough one.
There's a lot of different types of policy that you can think of. Finance is a big one, all the way through. Also, you start thinking about other things, is reliability. We're fortunate, but I know other agencies have been in multiple lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some policy behind that as well. And then just overall thinking about how we can help one another more some mutual aid policies that could be helpful. And in those states looking at multiple types of legislation, some actually harmful. So in the thought that they're trying to be helpful, I understand that, and trying to be helpful, but without that understanding can actually, we were just talking about that right before this panel, so we have to be mindful about smart legislation that can help with policy moving forward. I want me to answer now?
If you're welcome, you're welcome.
Okay, so there's a couple things going on. One being for Pasadena Water and Power agencies or customers, we recognize that if your home was burnt or destroyed, and your pipe's broken and leaking, that you don't want to come back to a big water bill. So what we employed in as far as policy is leak forgiveness. So up to $5,000 off your water bill if you're in that situation. So you're not hit with a large water bill if you come home to the destroyed home. So that's one policy that we did as well. And then for the water bill itself and reliability and cost in the future, it is prudent to invest now versus pay more later. And that's what we found with our resilient infrastructure. We invested in high quality materials now, which allowed us to return water service on faster in order to avoid many times more the cost with an emergency and post-emergency. So I think altogether it helps us keep our cost competitive and affordable.
Great. Thanks, Stacie. I want to take a few minutes. There have been some questions that have come in. We have a couple questions here that sort of focusing on what were the contaminants and where they came from. So let me ask a couple of those. One here, benzene was a major contaminant in our Rubio Canyon Water District. What was the most likely source for that contamination? I don't know whether Andy or Stacie might want to take this.
So I would say the source of benzene being detected in Rubio Canyon, as well as the other water systems from these two fires, is one of the three locations that I kind of mentioned before. It's either from structure, combustion, and burning. It's being sucked into the water distribution system through the pipe, through the water meter, and into the water main. It was thermal degradation of plastics in the in situ generation of benzene. So we actually took plastic pipes and other materials and we heated them up in the lab with water, and it does generate, they generate benzene and other things. Or just the third potential way that it gets in is through vegetation, trees and such burning, releasing these chemicals into the air and then being sucked in through the water storage tank vents or the open hydrants and such. So we don't, the science isn't there right now to tell you exactly what this benzene is from this issue. But there's some work that we're hoping to kick off where we're going to actually burn buildings in a very controlled environment and a safe environment, not actually like people's buildings. But we're going to, not here either, not here. It will be out east. But the purpose is to ask and answer these questions that probably many of you have. Where's this stuff coming from? What should we be looking for? Is benzene the only thing we should be looking for? Like all these questions is where we're headed.
Great, and maybe this one for Stacie. Question here about characterization of toxin speciation beyond just direct elemental analysis. So it's a question here, for instance, asbestos may not get flagged by ICP techniques. So exactly what, could you talk a little bit about the types of testing that you've been using?
Yeah, we did through a third-party lab. Actually, we don't have the ability to do that within our own water. We don't do that as often, so we don't have that ability within our own water quality lab. With third water quality lab, we did test for asbestos. Now, the type of testing, that is beyond my expertise. We do have our water quality manager here, Jack, that may know more about the actual testing protocols and methodology.
Okay, great. The question came in from Anonymous, but if you ask that question, perhaps you can find Jack later after the presentation. Maybe just one or two more here. There's a question here about, in light of discrepancies between researchers' findings and results from at-home tests, in general, are you advising people to do at-home testing before the fire? Oh, sorry, after the fire?
I'll take it first, and if you can add, we might actually have different ideas about this. So we'll see. One thing that was adding to the body of misinformation was some of the at-home testing, frankly. You know, a lot of folks, I mean, this is not common, right? So they're doing their at-home test, and they're like, oh my gosh, look at this number. It's different than my bottled water number. But frankly, that's well within safe drinking water. You know, for example, it was TDS. You know, I was like, well, we see that on that social media post, and we're like, that's great. That's lower than Colorado River water. You know, so, but there's a lot of misinformation, and because of that, they're like, my water's not safe to drink. Everybody, neighbors, don't drink your water. So there's some dangers in home testing if you don't know exactly what the results mean. And even with the testing, the picture of it, you don't even know what that is. We're guessing it was TDS, right? So, so there's that component too. So I think the best option is to call the people that do know it, which would be your water utility, and we can help with that situation, help give you information. Like I said, we've shown, we've proven, we've been as transparent as you can be with our water quality results.
Yeah, just mention having been involved in many different disasters. I remember sitting across the table from a family in Lahaina, and they were showing me the testing results for a pool test kit. And it was red, right? Because when there's chlorine present, it turns red. And I remember just the fear that they had that all of Maui's water was contaminated and nobody was telling them anything. And people were saying things, but they didn't have communication access to get that information. So there's a lot of well-placed fear that people have when these incidents occur, because they are scary and there are real health threats. And I think, you know, what we need to do is further socialize the approach to helping people. Right, so if the utilities, you know, many of the people's homes are destroyed and you know they're not there, well, then the state agency should step up and start communicating this information, right? This isn't like never been communicated before. Like, this has been done. It's been Groundhog Day to some degree, so there's some approach to doing this. And I think one of the issues is, in the absence of voices of reason, sometimes things get out of control. So I have seen TDS result meters say, you know, my level is 1,600. Don't drink your water on Facebook. Don't drink your water. They're not telling you that. And this happened in Paradise. And then I actually found out who that person was, and I called them and found out it was a TDS meter. And I had to explain to the individual that this isn't it. And she had like, 2,000 posts or something, shares. And so the utility didn't have the capacity or the people to do this. And so I think we just need better education for people. We need this, as you mentioned, the earthquake understanding of water system or wildfire situations. But we also need state agencies and county agencies to be on the ball ahead of time so that that information can be up so that everybody can go to it. So if they want to buy a test kit, they get the right one. And one of the other issues we've seen is companies will test your water. After Paradise, we saw companies basically testing any water that anybody brought to them in half-full mason jars that used to contain mayonnaise in them. And they would test it, and they would give the results back to them, and they'd say it's benzene-free. And so we also need oversight of these types of testing companies to make sure they're not taking people's money and giving them useless information, because then they'll take that and they'll post it online and say, see, my home is benzene-free, and then that actually kind of has some social impact where people feel bad if they actually do the testing right and find it. So there's a lot of issues with testing, but I think education, better governance and approaches, and just humanizing the fact that fear is completely understandable in this space, but there's something we can do about it.
I'd also like to add, even people with the right intentions, like there's some research folks that really wanted to find certain things out to help the situation. They weren't familiar with the methodology for sampling. They weren't really following the protocols. And so they say, here we have these results that are scientifically backed, and they were wrong. So all of those things too. So even beyond just home testing, testing in general, even by very smart people, but if they're not in this world, they don't know all the protocols. So that's key.
Excellent. Let me ask one other question because it's been upvoted a couple times, and I think it relates to this question about communication and potentially fear about what's possible and what's feasible. Question here is: there's been skepticism on enjoying beaches and other recreational water bodies. Is that something that people should worry about, and are there best practices to minimize exposure to toxins?
Did that on beaches? So for me, generally, I don't go into a beach after a storm event, and I live near one. So that's a general kind of rule of thumb, unfortunately, in an urban area, right? Following a storm event, just to kind of contaminate just off the roadways that can be going down into the beach. So that's that. I don't think this adds to that. I think a lot of the debris, et cetera, was caught in the debris basins, frankly, in the wildfire itself. And so the county is working with that too. We had very strict policies about what we can put into the storm drains following the fire as well. And the cleanup itself is also very cognizant of not contaminating our rivers and streams and eventually our beaches as well. So I do think there's a lot of regulations and policy around that already, but my own personal thing is after a rain event, I don't go into the water for a little bit.
Yeah, I would say, so we had a meeting with researchers who were working on the Lahaina beaches about 2-3 weeks ago. And so it turns out that the lessons from there were not translated here. And the way we found that out is I called them and I said, hey, who called you from Los Angeles? And they said, nobody. I'm like, okay, well, this is a problem because you all learned a whole bunch of things there, did a whole bunch of research, and nobody here is adopting it. And so I think one of the issues is we don't, as scientists and engineers and scholars, we're not connecting, and we're not going to the next event to kind of pass forward that information. But also, when that event happens, nobody's calling back to find out what happened before. So I think we need to do that. As far as the beaches here, I've been basically just following Heal the Bay and their approach to the beaches and beach water quality. They were doing testing, a lot of testing after the fire. And I know there are concerns with ash and debris and other things on the bay as well. I think there needs to be a lot more work. There is no playbook for beaches. There isn't. So, like, after a fire happens, what are you supposed to do? And the way it is everybody just wings it at every fire. And that's unacceptable, right? And it's unacceptable in science. In the water infrastructure world, we developed a playbook with these utilities. They know what to do now. They follow the path. It's institutionalized. It's their success. But when beaches are affected, there is no playbook. And so as scientists community, as advocates of beaches, I mean, the surfing community should probably pick up the torch and run forward here, right? We want safe water in beaches. I think we need to kind of define that space and kind of plow forward.
Yeah, you should have went first. No, that's great. And I'm also willing to go to Lahaina or Hawaii anytime with you, as you know. I'm actually from Hawaii, so the Lahaina fire, I'm not from Maui, I am from Oahu, but the Lahaina fire impacted all of us. And so I think that's great to connect, so thank you for that.
And that segues really nicely into sort of the last topic that we wanted to touch on tonight, which is thinking about water quality and its relationship to wildfire in a warming world. So you don't need to be a climate scientist to understand that living with wildfires and wildland-urban interface fires is becoming a much more common feature in Southern California, but really throughout the country, as we've seen again from Hawaii. So sort of shifting in that direction, maybe Hannah, you could start this time. Are there water quality related policies, and those may be national policies or more local policies, that should be revisited following the recent wildfires and in terms of planning for our future?
So there's lots of regulations nationally, state, about water quality, and we have pretty comprehensive testing requirements to keep our drinking water safe. I think what can be learned from fires is, like Andy and Stacie have been saying, the post-disaster response is quite different than the day-to-day monitoring. And so how do you create a playbook for utilities to quickly understand what the contamination is, how much of the system it's affecting, and kind of ingrain that into policy so that it's not every utility winging it. There's really kind of a standardized practice for making sure that water is safe and returned as quickly as possible. And I think part of this is not just water quality, but also how you build resilient systems in the first place. And that needs to be part of the policy conversation as well as when we think about where development happens and how we're integrating development with natural systems to reduce risk to water supply and quality. And so I think there's a ton that needs to be revisited, but it starts with really kind of codifying a lot of what we've learned in best practices from these recent fires into regulation so that it is standardized across all districts that haven't necessarily experienced a fire themselves.
Yeah, there's a question here that came in from Slido. This was for Andy. Have there been other jurisdictions that have adopted policies after recent disasters that stand out as particularly good, or in some cases maybe bad directions forward?
Yes.
Would you care to share?
Yeah. So, policy, as I interpret it, is a decision to do or not do something. And we have good decisions of people doing the right thing, and we have bad decisions of people doing the wrong thing, and then we have good decisions of doing nothing and bad decisions of doing nothing. So I think, one of the challenges that I've found coming from the environmental engineering space is that we learn these principles of science and engineering, and then we apply them, and then we get into industry or the public space, and then everything becomes optional to some degree. And it's like, how is it optional? So I think really what we need to do is we need to make engineers and scientists and help them better understand that post-disaster space so they can understand that they're gonna have to do something. There's no maybe law that requires it, because there are no laws really post-disaster to do all this stuff. Almost everything that Pasadena, not everything, maybe less than 40% was required, and they went above that. We've seen Paradise did the same thing. We've seen other water systems that I've talked to, not here, but elsewhere, say, yeah, we're not doing that. We don't have to. We're not going to do it. The state's not telling us to do it, so we're not. And so I think, we need to get outside our comfort zone in a sense that lean forward, protect public health, keep that North Star that you're running towards, and recognize that everybody deserves the safe water that they had before driving back.
If I can maybe push on that point a little bit further, and I can open this up to the entire panel, is there a sense that it's more efficient to do this at the local level because each community is slightly different in how they would deal with this, or that actually having statewide and nationwide policies are really going to be the most effective way to prepare us for these types of disasters going forward?
I'll just add, I think it's going to be a mixture of all of it. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach to pretty much anything, So I think local control and ability is going to be key, because we can respond probably be best. If we had some kind of state or federal law that it could have hindered us, actually. It could have went the other way. So there's that. But it has to be in connection with state and federal policies as well. There was a state Senate bill that came out about benzene that just was applied, I think, last year, January 1st, 2024. And that was about the benzene order and about testing for benzene. And that was actually key, because that kind of perked our mind about what we need to do. Before that, it's not even in the top of our mind. So I think it's going to be a mixture of all this. It's not a perfect answer, but it's just not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, and I'll say that there are, like many small utilities, there's one utility in California, and it's been it's been about 3.5 or 4 years since their fire, and they've never recovered. So they still have water tanks out in front of all their homes. They don't have the money to basically survive. And the testing approach, the guidance from US EPA was you need to test enough. There wasn't tell you how to test, it wasn't what to look for, it wasn't any of that. And so they followed that guidance, they followed the state's guidance, they followed the county's guidance. When it came time to get a reimbursement from FEMA, FEMA denied them, $7.4 million. And so they couldn't rebuild their system was condemned. And it's because of the lack of policy and the existence of policy legally why it was, they lost at arbitration. And so I think this is really the issue of, is there too much, is there too little? Clearly there's something wrong. So a little utility that can't survive because they did everything all these different agencies said is a problem. And I think that's what we need to address.
Okay, Stacie, then maybe I'll have one of the last questions here before we take the final questions from the audience. So how has the Eaton fire modified your thinking about future water needs and water quality for both the Altadena and the Pasadena communities?
That's a great question. I think a lot of things that were, I guess, middle of our mind is now front of mind. I think that's a key thing. It can happen and it will happen. We are living in a world of extremes. I'm not just talking about politics, just extremes. The last 5 years in California alone saw the driest period in record and the wettest period on record. And it's kind of that dry, wet cycle that becomes fodder for fire, right? We had extreme winds. We've never, unprecedented wind events, over 100 miles per hour wind events. And prior to January, this is a fire in January. This is our rainy season. This is our wettest time of the year. Prior to January 2025, we had the driest winter coming into it, nearly on record. So November, December, and January right there too. So these extremes are in our future. Unfortunately, this is going to be a growing body of knowledge and science as we're going to see more of this. And frankly, we're going to see more extremes as well. So we need to be prepared for that. So it's kind of weaves into our future thinking for almost everything we do. Even just today, we're talking about what that means, what fire resilience means when we do a water shutdown for maintenance. How can we bring it back up again in case there's something like an event? So we're thinking about that all the way through with everything that we do. And it's not just about, I know a lot of folks think just add more storage. Luckily we didn't run out of water, but adding more storage is not necessarily just the answer, because in a warming environment, that means you have other water quality issues if that water's not moving. It'll lead to stagnant water within your whole system if you just build bigger. So there's all these different policies that are thoughts that we're kind of balancing in order to make sure that we have a resilient system into the future. And we also, I think it also helped encourage us to kind of do what we're doing. Invest in your system, in a resilient system that'll save you so much more than trying to take care of it later when it's destroyed.
Great, thanks, Stacie. Okay, so let me take just a couple minutes to address some of the last questions that have come in. If you did not have a chance to get on Slido and you have a question you really wanted to ask, feel free to just raise your hand and we could take a couple of those as well. So let's see, this is a question here maybe for Andy. In light of fire and other environmental impacts of plastics, do you think that we should change our opinion on the plastic pipes that have been approved by AWWA and also by NSF?
So that's a loaded question, but it's a policy decision. You, as a utility or a community, get to decide if you're going to use certain materials. And we know that there's fire-resistant homes, right? You're not allowed to build with asphalt shingles in certain places. You're not allowed to have, pine trees all around your house, right, or laying on your house. Sometimes you're not allowed to have, you're supposed to close off the gutters, right, so the embers don't get in, or the attic roofs and such. So we have these acknowledgments that there's other material systems and approaches that we should defend against, or that somebody made the judgment call that it's not something that we're going to do. So I think we're not going to see any federal movement on building codes or standards. We may not even see any state movement in any ways. But there are definitely good questions to be asked about whether or not we should adopt certain codes. I will say that, after a state disaster, let's say like the 2024 Mountain View fire that was not a federal disaster in Ventura County, state taxpayer money is used to reimburse for the cost of recovery, as well as county money as well. And so, what the issue is the state taxpayers would then need to make a decision about what constitutes building codes and standards for the state, because state money would be used to support that. So I think right now we're at a policy decision or policy discussion, and I look forward to seeing more data that can inform that.
Great, and maybe I'll open this to all the panel members. We heard a moment ago about winging it. Are there other important questions related to navigating disaster recovery where we're worried that collectively just winging it is not going to be appropriate, and where we need better science?
Go for it, Andy. You started. Yeah. I learned my lesson from the last one.
So it's not unusual that the decisions about public health and safety are made without data. That's not unusual. What is unusual to me is confidence in making those decisions and then projecting that into the community and assuring everybody that everything's okay without any data to validate it. So I think we need, and we're seeing this in the water sector, we're seeing it in California, in Colorado, in Hawaii, Oregon, in Arizona, and New Mexico. We're seeing state agencies, utilities are really leading it, saying, we're not telling people the water's safe until we get the data to do that, and now we know what to look for, right? And sometimes I will tell you, having been in certain conversations, not with this fire, but others, states have been uncomfortable, and they're like, look, just test for this one thing, and if we don't find it, everything's fine. And the utilities said, okay, if something happens, are you going to be standing with us on the stage? And the state's like, no. So the utility's like, okay, we get the message. We are going to test the way we want to test because we need to know that our water is safe because we're here in the community. So I think that leadership that we're seeing, at least with fires, can start spidering out into other situations and also helping and supporting county governments and state governments and state agencies. Because generally when you have not necessarily great decisions happen, it's when people really don't know the answer and they're uncomfortable, and sometimes they kind of back themselves into a decision, which then they end up regretting. So if we get out there ahead of time and help people sooner, there's less likelihood that they'll end up in that position, which also can slow recovery down.
Yeah, and if I can add about winging it, we're all heavily regulated, particularly with the State Division of Drinking Water. And I think one of the lessons learned here is that for the state agencies to be a little bit more cohesive there as well. I think different areas were getting different messages, especially at the beginning. But within a few days, got it all together. But so that kind of understanding within that organization itself can then help all the local agencies. So if the regulators are all informed and have a good, clear direction forward, then that'll trickle down to the local agencies as well as we start talking through what we need to do next.
Great. And maybe just one last question then. One came in. Are there 2 or 3 critical improvements that PWP would consider that would harden the water infrastructure against future wildfire?
Critical improvements. So one opportunity are the facilities that are damaged right now. So, for example, one of our reservoirs has been damaged by the fire itself. So how we rebuild that, like I said, we have that front of mind, how we can be resilient there. So that's one of the potential opportunities on how we do that, and not just for fire, but also earthquake. A lot of our facilities, Pasadena has a long history which is another way to say that we are old and we have old infrastructure. So this is also an opportunity for us to rebuild better. We look at that not just for fire, but for earthquake as well, and any other emergency going forward. I think other opportunities too is, like I talked about, the emergency interconnections and how we can better partner with our neighboring agencies as well, and beefing up our mutual aid. You know, there was a point in this discussion way after the fire. I was talking with an organization, utility emergency, CUEA, right? I didn't even know that we were members. And so that was a key resource that we could have been using during the fire too. So I think our strengthening our partnerships, strengthening our interconnections, and really looking at opportunities to harden our system when available. At the same time, we don't want to be hindering the rebuild. So there's going to be a balance of that. So that's why we're making sure that we're working fast and proactively so that we can build resilient at the same time of rebuilding back fast.
Perfect. Thanks, Stacie. All right. Well, I want to thank all the panel members. I want to give each panel member just maybe 30 seconds for a sort of closing remark to make sure that everything that they wanted to convey gotten across. So, Hannah, would you want to just close us out here?
I just want to say thanks to everyone for being part of this event. It's really, why we're here is to be able to engage with the community and talk about the science and also the management. And so, yeah, just really excited to be here and to see so much involvement.
I want to also say thank you for hanging around. And also, the panelists and moderator and the ringleader, thank you so much for everything. One last thing I want to say is you all are pretty lucky to be next to Caltech and with Caltech community members. You have exceptional access to knowledge and brain power. So if you have a question, I think you should pose it to Caltech's researchers and approach them, because really the way that you recover stronger is by community engagement and helping one another. And if Caltech doesn't have that access, they likely reach out to some other people around the globe to kind of answer the questions that you need answered. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. I think thanks all around. Thank you to Caltech particularly, and fellow expert panelists. It's amazing. I do want to say a big thank you to the community. We have a long history of being resilient and overcoming together. And through this unprecedented Eaton fire emergency, the community stepped up, continued to step up together for unprecedented response and resilience. Dina strong, right, as our mayor says. And from this experience, we're only going to be stronger together. So I do appreciate it, and I just want to say thank you to the community.
Excellent. So I just want to acknowledge one more time the support from both of the Lynn Centers. As Mike said at the beginning, we've recorded this session, and so if you have friends, if you have colleagues that you think might benefit from this, I'd encourage you to pass that along. But most importantly, thanks to all of you for coming out tonight, and thank you to our speakers, Hannah, Andy, Stacie. Let's give them a round of applause.